Hello, welcome to Towle Talks. Today we talk about how to handle arrays in PHP. Requirements. Make sure you have a strong command of the basic control structures of PHP before starting this lecture. Also, make sure you understand how to use variables and the echo command in PHP. Arrays are big deals in PHP. You're going to find out that a lot of things are going to use them. Forms are going to use them. CodeIgniter, which we're going to cover later, is going to use them. So arrays are very important to cover in PHP. So please pay attention to this section. You will see elements of this lecture repeating throughout the entire time we do PHP. Arrays. So arrays are going to be very important in PHP, and in PHP they are essentially a glorified list. There are a lot of different functions for them in PHP, so I'll probably try to post a link to them, but there are a lot of things you can do with them. The programmer does not have to worry about the type or the size of the array, which is nice. So here we have my Notepad++. We have a file called arrays.php. This is underneath a file called L3 in my htdocs. And here we're going to talk about arrays. Real quick, it's not going to mean a lot to you, but here is our end result. We're actually going to split this up in two parts. The first part is going to be with the classic style arrays, and the second part will be with the associative arrays, which is very important in PHP. But right now, let's focus on the first part. So this is kind of the output we're expecting, and this will make more sense once we get through the code. So starting off, this used to be the old school for declaring arrays. I can declare an array this way. However, I can also declare an array, and it's preferred now, I suppose, like this. This is declaring this. These two statements are equivalent. This is the new way. This is the old school. I can also declare an array with things inside it. So here I have 1, 2, 3, Bob, true, all sorts of things here. And notice that I don't have to have the same type or the same data type inside each of these arrays. Whoa. Furthermore, if I want to add to this array, and this is only works, and now this is going to be a classic array. I'm getting ahead of myself. So here I'm going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 be the index. So if I say my array 0, I'm going to get 1. If I say my array 3, I'm going to get Bob. So this is going to be pretty classic to what you're used to right now. There's a classic array with just numbers. If I want to add something to the end, I could do my array empty bracket equals hello world, and this should, if I can type, this should add hello world, the string, to the end of the array after the true. So if I save this, run back to my Firefox, and refresh this, oh, and I have this hard-coded, so I should probably use a different mechanism for this. I can do, I think, count. Yeah, count my array. There, this will give you the size, and of course the max index is going to be 1 less than the size of the array, so this logic will hold true, just like you're used to. So this is a better way of doing it. And now if I print this out, I should see hello world, and it's a key 5. So this is a quick and dirty way of adding a value to the array. Consider the array something close to like a list. So those, you think of the list data object, it's basically a marriage between an array and a list. So we can append things, and you can push stuff on the back and take it off. So this is one way to append it. Another way you can append something is if I do array push, sending the array I want to add something to, or the array I'm adding it to, and then the element, in this case my monster, a string, and then I want to see if key exists 5, and then so now it would be 6 because I added that other thing. So now this would be if the key exists 6. So this is checking to see if I have the 6th index in my array. after I've added this thing using array push, and then this is checking to see if the key exists. This is actually very important later on with associative arrays. And then I'm going to do array pop, so I can also treat this like a stack. So the end will be popped off, and now if I check to see if index 6 exists, it should be false, and it should say the key does not exist anymore. And then I can also use isSet. So isSet my array particular index, again 6, because I added this one line up here. So if this array is set, if that's false, then we know that this was truly deleted, and this will confirm that this array pop removed this element from this array. There are a ton of different functions for arrays, and we'll try to post a link to them. We're not going to go through them all, but there are a ton of array options. Luckily for you, most arrays are already going to be created in PHP. It's just a matter of manipulating them, adding or condensing them into one array, or reading through the array. So if I save this and it works the way I think it should, so say we see 0 to 5, and we see the index value, and we also see the value for it. Then they say the key exists because we pushed something on. Then we popped it off, and it says the key does not exist. And then we have isSet confirms the element is not there, which means it proves to us that the element is no longer in that array. We know that it's been deleted. So that is how you handle the old style of arrays. Now, one more thing before we get to associative arrays is I have a for each method here, and this is a little easier than using the classic for loop, although I can use the classic for loop like I did up here. I can do the classic for loop. However, in PHP, you can do my array and then say as a key and a value. I could also say index here. These are just two variables, and the thing is, this arrow here equals greater than sign is saying I'll have some sort of index or key associated to this value. So here we have echo, the key is key, and then the value is value. What I should see here is the index number, because we're using in numbers right now, and I should see the value. So I go back to my web page, you'll see that I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the appropriate value. Something similar to what I had earlier, but this is with the for each. Remember, a lot of times the for each is not super useful, because usually a for each mechanism only gives you the value. And a lot of algorithms require you to have the index number or the key. So a lot of times the for each ends up going unused. In PHP, you can get the key, and so you will see a lot of people use for each for all their arrays. This is more commonly used for the associative array, which we'll talk about in a moment, but it's still used a lot. Associative arrays. Similar to the normal arrays in PHP, however, the index values are strings instead of numbers. From a Java background, you might call this a dictionary. Used quite a bit in PHP and in CodeIgniter. You will see both of these many times throughout the semester. Now, the next thing, the last part of this lecture, we're going to talk about associative arrays. Associative arrays are very important. You're going to find out that CodeIgniter uses them a lot. I believe Cake, from what I remember, uses them a lot. PHP in general uses them to get information from the web page back to the server, which we'll talk about very shortly in the next lecture. And so it's vital that you understand associative arrays. If you come from a Java background, you can think of it as a dictionary. If you come from a Python background, you can think of it as an associative array. I believe they use that term. But basically, instead of using numbers for our index and arrays, we're going to use strings. So here I've created a new array and I've initialized it with two things inside it. But this time I'm going to have a string with a equals greater than operator and then a value. And what's going to happen is this is now going to reference this value. So instead of a number, I'm going to have a string. Likewise, Sam is going to reference this value, and then here you see I add a bunch of different, and this is basically adding it on to the end of the array, and I'm giving it by saying, okay, I have my D, and then this time I have to specify what the string is, and then for the key, then I give it the index. So remember up here, I could just do empty because it was just whatever the default number was. Down here, I have to actually specify the string that's going to index. So it's just like an associative or a regular array, except instead of numbers, I'm going to have words, and I can look up via this word and determine and find out what this value is. So if for example I did not that echo D Bob, this would return. This will print Bob. In fact, I'll just leave it there just to prove to you that it does in fact work. I can also modify this, so I could do, let me just modify Bob again, so I can do $D Bob, just like a normal array. I'm going to reference it, then I'm going to say equals $, we'll just say 10.0. So we just set it, so instead of being 6.78, we're going to say 10.0, then we'll echo a break line, and then down here we should see the new value for Bob. So I'm going to use it, I'm going to read from it just like a normal array, except instead of a number I have a word, and I'm going to modify it like I would a normal array, except instead of a number I have a word. Again, the for each is a lot more useful here because now I have for each, the array as, and a key value pair, and I can print key and then the value, and this time the key is more important because it's not just going to be a number, it's going to be a string, and that has there's really no pattern to these strings for my associative array, so it's vital that we have this kind of mechanism so we can go through the entire array. So now if I save this and I go to my documents, I refresh this. So here we have, after our last for each loop for the normal array, we have 6.78. That was the original value of Bob. Then you see the for each loop. The key is Tim, the value is 5.3. The key is Sam, the value is 2.5. Bob, the value is 10. Notice that we did in fact change the value of Bob because originally this was the value of Bob. And then we can see that the entire array is printed out. So here we can actually unset %d and then say Jim, and this will delete the value from the array. So this is like removing an element from a list, if you want to think of it that way, except I forgot my closing bracket. And then now we no longer have this value. Also, I can check to see if this value exists. Now this is very important, especially without using a framework, to make sure that you have the right key. So you can do does key exist, or you can just do is set. Most people prefer to just do is set, but technically you could do is key exist. So we're going to say is set D Jim. So does that value exist? And then we're going to say if that's false, echo Jim's entry is gone. Now it's very important, and normally you do it the reverse way. Normally you want to make sure that this key exists in order to use it. So I'm kind of doing the opposite case. Normally you're going to say if is set D Jim, then go ahead and use D index Jim, otherwise print error or something. But this is going to prove that we have deleted this entry completely, and then the is set will return false because this does not exist. You will get a nasty looking error on your web application, or worst case, a white screen if you try to use an associative array indexed at an invalid key or a key that does not exist. Oh, forgot my parentheses. I was a little worried there for a moment. Okay. There we go. Okay, and then so after we did the for each loop, we did the unset on Jim, and then we said Jim's entry is gone. So that is a brief explanation about arrays, normal arrays, and then associative arrays. You are going to have a lot of practice with associative arrays, so play around with them a little bit. They are going to be very important throughout this entire semester. Here is the problem of the day. Basically, we're going to have two parallel arrays. The first one will be a normal array indexed with numbers that contains words. The second array will be an associative array keyed with the words from the first array. And then they'll have whatever value you want to populate them with. Select three random numbers between 0 and the size of the first array minus 1, and then print the random number, print the word from the first array, and then print the value from the second array keyed by that first word you found from the random number from the first array. For review, we've learned populating arrays, we've learned how to iterate or iterating through arrays with the for each. We've talked about associative arrays, which probably is the only real new thing you may not have been aware of. And then we've talked about manipulating arrays. Alright guys, this has been Towle Talks. Thank you for watching. I really hope you've learned something about arrays. Again, we're going to see this again. Until next time, cheers. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something and enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a comment or a like below. And again, thank you.